Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you guys how to stream real-time bars using Interactive Brokers. Now you will need a data subscription to get this to work, but in summary what the script will do is for either futures, stocks, or options, it'll get the real-time bars and write to a CSV file in your working directory. And once you're done streaming or close the connection, we can read the file in. You could also read in the file while it's streaming, but it will have to be done in a separate R script. But just to show you how this works, we have two helper functions. This first one will read in the file and return the data as an XTS object or as a data frame. So we have a flag here called as XTS that we can set either to true if you want XTS objects or false if you want to return a data frame. We have to also insert a file name for the CSV file. If you're only streaming one symbol, by default the file name will be the symbol. Otherwise, if you're streaming multiple symbols for either futures, stocks, or options, I hard-coded a generic name for the data, which I'll go over later in the script. And then lastly, we have to insert the ticker names that you require to stream. Every 5 seconds, we get a message from the streamer. It's not always the real-time bars. So in order to process these messages, I modified the eWrapper.RealTimeBars.CSV function. And the modification I did was to add the ID, because for any of these functions, you have the option to stream for multiple symbols, whereas the generic one only offered to write to the CSV without the ID. And I'll go over these functions, but I wanted to show you how this runs or how to get this to work. So I'm going to require the packages and also require our helper functions. Now for this example, I'll be using the real-time streamer for futures, and for the tickers, I'm going to use the ES and NQ. So let's go ahead and run these. And I do have my Trader Workstation open, and for my API settings, I'll display those on the screen. These are the current settings that I have, and if you want to change these, you can click on Global Configuration, and then these will be located under API and Settings. So let's go ahead and run the streamer for the futures data. So this won't print anything onto the screen, but on the console, you will have this stop button, which means that the script is running, and we're currently collecting data for the futures. But out in your working directory, you'll see a file called futuresibdata.csv. And if we preview that file, here we have our data for both of the symbols, and we can distinguish these by the current ID. So 1 appears to be for the ES, and 2 appears to be for the NASDAQ. So we have our timestamp, the open, high, low, close, the volume, the weighted average price, and also the trade count. And these get updated every 5 seconds. So if we close this out. So I'll go ahead and stop the streamer, and then we're going to use our helper functions to clean our data. So since I'm streaming for multiple tickers, the default file name will be this one. And we'll take a look at 2 examples by returning the data as an XTS object or as a data frame. We also need to pass in the tickers since we have to modify those IDs and that ID column. So let's run this first one. Now in the environment, you'll see these variables. So we have data for ES and the NQ. Now let's return these as a data frame. So let's run this next line and we'll take a look at ES. So you have the option to return these however you want. I just figured that writing as a data frame is database friendly, so you can upload this or append this to your database. If you're only streaming one symbol, then for the file name, you would just change it to the symbol name. So say I was just streaming for ES, I would just change the file name to ES. So that's how this script will run, and you can get futures, stocks, and options. For the options, we have to pass in the ticker, the expiration, the strike, the flag, all as vectors. So as an example, I have a Tesla option expiring 2/3. The strike is 145, and this is a call option. And then you will list the option symbol in the same order for the next stock or ETF that you want. So I streamed some data, and I'll go ahead and run this so we can take a look at the formatted data. So I'll run this block. I'm going to modify the tickers, and then we're going to take a look at the XTS objects. So we'll take a look at the Tesla call, all as an XTS object. And if we choose to return as a data frame, we'll take a look at the second symbol. All right, now let's go over the functions to see what's inside. We'll go ahead and close this out. We'll start off with our helper functions. So again, raw to value, we'll grab the raw data and return either an XTS object or a data frame for each symbol that you streamed. So if we open this up, we're going to read in the CSV file. We're going to fix the column names. So depending on whether the user chooses to return this as an XTS object or a data frame, it will go into each block. So if this is an XTS object that we want to return and the length of of the ticker names is greater than 1, then we're going to use lapply for each unique ID. We're going to subset that data for the particular ID. We only want unique cases. Sometimes it'll return duplicate timestamps for some reason, so we only want unique cases. We're going to convert this as an XDS object, modify the column names, and then we're going to assign that data into our global environment. Otherwise, if it's just one symbol, we're going to convert this as an XDS object. If the user sets as XDS to false, then it'll run this next block. And again, we're testing whether or not the ticker names is greater than 1. And it's essentially the same as the block above, except that we only fix the timestamp and return the correct symbol for the ID. Otherwise, if it's just one symbol, then we're just going to fix the timestamp and return the data. So we'll go ahead and minimize that function. Now this wrapper does exist if you run ewrapper.realtimebars.csv, but again, I just modified it because the generic one, or the one that's available, doesn't return the ID for the column. So what I ended up doing to modify this was just add an extra column for the ID. So I believe these were 7s, and then we added the column name so that it inserts the ID for the appropriate bar. And I'm also going to add the ID in line 77 so that we merge all the data together. And if I remember correctly, I modified line 87 to adjust for that extra column. Every time we get a message from the streamer, it'll run this function so that it modifies the data correctly and appends a new row in our CSV file. Let's go ahead and minimize this. Now to get futures data from the streamer, we pass in the tickers or ticker, and that's all we really need. So if we open this up, we're going to start off by removing the TWS object from our global environment if it exists. So for each of the functions, you'll see that for the very first line. Next, we test if the user inserted more than one ticker for the futures. And if they did, we need to select the contract that we want to stream for each. To do that, we're going to establish a connection. We're going to create an empty TWS contract. We're going to pass in the symbol, the currency, and the security type. We're going to require contract details. And if you saw my previous video, all we are doing in this block is selecting the front month by going into each of these contracts and selecting the one that's about to expire next. So after we have selected that, we're going to create a TWS futures by passing in the symbol, the exchange, and the expiration. So it'll run this block for each of the securities you pass in. We're also going to create our CSV file within the block, and we need to set n to the length of the tickers. So here I'm just going to replace that in case you want to stream more. Otherwise, if you're just requiring one symbol, then again, we need to select the front month. We need to create the TWS futures object and return that. And also within the block, we're going to create our CSV file using the ticker name or symbol name. After we have our securities, we're going to require real-time bars by passing in each of the securities. And by default, the bar size is 5 or 5 seconds. And you can modify this to any number, but it's a multiplier of the bar size. So if I set this to 2, then it'll change the bar size to 10 seconds. I also pass in the event wrapper and the file we want to write to, and after it's done streaming, then we want to close the file and disconnect. So that's it for the futures. We'll go ahead and minimize this. For stocks, it's similar. So if we open this up, since these are just stocks, we don't need to create contracts. Instead, what we're going to do is create a TWS stock object for all the tickers the user passes in. And within the same block, we need to create the file name to write to. Otherwise, if it's just one security, then we would just create one object for TWS stock. And also within that same block, we create our CSV file using the symbol or the ticker name. And after we have the security, we're going to run require real-time bars and having the same parameters. The wrapper for the options is similar to the future, where we have to select the contract. So let's open that up. So we need to create contracts for each of the stocks the user wants to stream. So again, if the length of ticker is greater than 1, we need to create securities for each. We start off by creating an empty contract. We're going to paste in the underlying symbol for the symbol within that contract. We need to set our currency, set our security type to option. We're going to pass in the expiration for each, the strike for each, the exchange will be smart, and we need to pass in the right for each, so whether it's a call or a put. After we set those, we require contract details for that contract. We reassign it to extract the very first variable within this list. And now we can create our TWS option by passing in the local name, the expiration, the strike, the right, the exchange, the currency, the underlying symbol, and the multiplier. So we're going to run this for each of the options the user passes in. So that'll return the TWS option for each of the symbols you pass in. If it's for multiple, then we're going to use a generic name for the CSV, and N is the length of ticker. So I'll go ahead and replace that. Otherwise, if it's just one symbol, we do the same, but it will only return one object for security. After we create that, we're going to create our CSV file by using the ticker name, and n will be 1. After we set our securities, we can go ahead and stream the data by running require real-time bars, passing in the same parameters as before, and after we're done, we disconnect and close our file. So I'll go ahead and minimize that. So again, if you're streaming for one option, then we just pass in the variables for that one option. Otherwise, if it's for multiple, then we need to create vectors for each of the parameters and then pass in each vector within this function. Alright guys, well this concludes the video. I hope this was useful information. I'll leave a link down in the description area to the Patreon where you can find the script. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.